This is it. The day the Brown family is confronted with the truth. The biting winter air outside of the courthouse nipped sharply at the flesh of anyone adventurous enough to stand in the long line of onlookers. But nobody departed. The crowd had been waiting since dawn, wrapped in scarves and jackets, every one of them ready to say that they had seen it for themselves. This wasn't an ordinary trial. This was the trial of Kody Brown, the individual whose non-traditional family had captivated, polarized, and amused millions of individuals for years. The high stone structure towered above, its broad staircase powdered with the day's frost. The double doors at the top were shut tight for the moment, but every camera eye, every news reporter's microphone, and every inquisitive pair of eyes was riveted to them. Behind those doors, something was about to happen that would make history. At 9:27 a.m., a hum swept the crowd like a wave. Phones were held high. Camera flashes flashed rapidly. The doors were opening. The lawyers appeared first. The sharp suits, the leather briefcases, the faces that revealed nothing. They made their way with practiced ease, skirting around the reporters in silence. And then, the moment that everyone was waiting for, Kody Brown appeared into view. He wore a charcoal gray suit, his trademark blonde hair slicked back, but there was no misreading the tension in his jaw. His eyes darted through the crowd for a moment, drinking in the chaos, before being fixed ahead. In his right hand, he clutched a slender folder. Proof, maybe? But his left arm was securely around Robin's. Robin Brown appeared as if she hadn't slept in weeks. Her eyes were wide, the wide of equal parts fear and intent. She had on a dark green jacket, her hair loose down her back, and in her other hand she gripped a small handbag so tightly her knuckles were white. Slowly they made their way down courthouse steps, every step chosen. The clicking of camera shutters was now deafening, accompanied by yelled questions from reporters. Kody, are the allegations correct? Robin, did you have knowledge of missing funds? Is this the demise of the Brown family? Neither of them replied. They did not need to. The way Robin kept her head down, the way Kody's lips pressed into a thin, unreadable line, it all spoke volumes without words. Inside the courtroom, the room was already full. Relatives and friends, local news reporters, and even a couple of curious onlookers who had somehow managed to find seats. The air was heavy, not with anticipation, but with a heavy, odd sort of tension, like the pre-storm air before a thunderstorm. Christine was waiting in the room. She was seated in the front row, her back straight, her hands clasped in her lap. But there was no confusion in the glint in her eyes, a blending of certainty and finally arrived vindication. Her dress was navy blue, her hair simply styled, as if to proclaim, I didn't come here to make a good impression. I came here to be heard. Janelle sat next to her. Unlike Christine, she wasn't exactly looking eager. She was looking exhausted. Exhausted in a way that went beyond physical but emotional. Her mouth pressed into a thin smile, as Christine whispered something to her. But her eyes remained fixed on the front of the room. Several rows away, half hidden in shadow, sat Meri. She appeared to curl in on herself, as if not wanting anyone to see her. But people did see, because everyone was asking themselves the same question. Whose team was she on? The bailiff's voice chopped through the murmurs. All rise. Everyone rose as the judge came in. She was a tall figure with prominent cheekbones, and eyes that appeared to cut through you. Her black robe flowed as she seated herself, resting a thick pile of files tidily in front of her on the bench. You may be seated, she instructed, speaking in a calm but authoritative voice. When the room quieted, she scanned the papers on her desk, and then the faces in front of her. This court is now in session for the case of Brown versus Brown, she declared. The case is one of financial disagreements, property settlements, and claims of misconduct. The words lingered like smoke. Money differences, accusations. For the first time, the Brown family's problems were no longer being whispered around online communities or splashed across reality television headlines. They were being said in a courtroom, spoken into legal evidence. Kody sat next to his lawyer, his hands curled tightly in front of him. His face was impassive. No frown, no smile, simply a wall. Robin was sitting to his right, staring at the table in front of her, as if she didn't look at anyone, she could make herself believe she wasn't there. Opposite Christine, she leaned a little towards her attorney, muttering something that caused him to nod his head. Janelle looked at Christine, then the judge, as though counting out each word in her mind before uttering. The judge's eyes swept around the room again. I will remind everyone present that this is a court of law, she warned strongly. I expect order. I expect respect. This is not a TV studio. There will be no interruptions, no outbursts, and no obiter dicta from the gallery. Do you all understand? A murmur of assent rippled through the room. Christine's lawyer rose first. He was a tall man with silver hair and an easily carried voice. Your Honor, he started out. My client spent close to 3 decades of her life with this family. She built a home, raised children, gave financially and emotionally. And when she finally made the tough choice to leave, she had nothing. No property, no savings, no equitable share of the assets she helped build. Kody fidgeted in his seat, but remained quiet. Robin's fists clenched in her lap. And she is not the only one. The attorney went on. There are other people in this family who have other stories to tell. This case is not about bitterness, Your Honor. It is about fairness. It is about the truth. The judge nodded, writing something down on her pad. In the back row, a reporter wrote furiously. Another readjusted her camera, zooming in on Christine's face. When the attorney was done, the judge turned to Kody's side of the table. Mr. Brown, does your counsel wish to respond? Kody's lawyer stood, a younger man with sharp glasses, and a tone that was both polite and defiant. Yes, Your Honor. We will prove that these allegations are inflated, and in certain instances completely untrue. Mr. Brown has ever conducted himself in the most admirable interests of his family, and obeyed the law. This case is merely a try to distort the truth for personal advantage. Kody did at last glance up, his gaze settling on Christine. For an instant, the room contracted around them. No words were spoken, but the past between them was so loud everyone could hear. The judge sat up straight. Very well, we will take testimony. But I want to make one thing absolutely clear. This court will not tolerate drama. We handle facts, not emotions. Her gavel came down in a sudden crack, and that was the official start of the battle. The echo of the gavel still hung in the air when Christine's attorney stood up. His stance was firm, nearly that of a man who already knew he held the advantage. Papers rustled and a faint hum of muffled conversations filled the courtroom. But the instant he spoke, all was silence. Your Honor, he stated, his tone even but with a hint of steel. My client spent almost 3 decades of her life with the Brown family. She was not only a wife, she was a builder, a caretaker, and an economic contributor to the family's prosperity. But when she left, she had nothing. No property, no savings, no equitable share of what she helped build. Christine sat still next to him, her gaze straight ahead, but the slightest movement of feeling crossed her face. She had practiced this scene in her mind 100 times, but now that it was occurring, it was more burdensome than she had anticipated. The attorney approached the bench, holding a folder full of papers. These are records of her financial contributions over the years. You'll see deposits from her earnings into joint accounts. You'll see receipts for household expenses that she covered herself. And yet there is no record of those contributions being returned when she left. Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his jaw clenched, his fingers drumming a slow rhythm on the table. Robin looked at him, then at the lawyer, her lips compressed into a thin, strained line. The lawyer pressed on, his voice harder. This is not about resentment, Your Honor. This is about justice. This is about the law. And the law is clear. When assets are acquired together, they should be split equally. My client is not seeking more than she is entitled to. She's seeking what rightfully belongs to her. A soft buzz ran through the audience. Christine's attorney slightly turned, pointing in the direction of the other side of the room. And she's not single. Janelle Brown has her own tale, one that unveils a pattern. Janelle's attorney, a calm woman in a navy blue suit, stood up to address. Your Honor, My client put tens of thousands of dollars into family property and joint ventures. She believed her money was for the whole family's good. Today, however, that property belongs to Mr. Brown and Mrs. Robin Brown alone, with no payment or recognition of my client's portion. Kody leaned over his lawyer, hushing something in a hasty tone, but microphones picked up snippets. That's not how it happened. They're twisting it. Janelle's attorney proceeded to the evidence table, laying out several documents before the judge. These are bank records. They indicate my client's private funds going into accounts in the name of Mr. Brown. There is no record of repayment, no contracts, no agreements, just faith. And that faith has been violated. Christine and Janelle shared a fleeting look, the kind of look that only those who had been through the same war could exchange. The judge adjusted her glasses and gazed at Kody's lawyer. Counsel, do you have a response? Kody's attorney rose, zipping up his suit coat. He answered with a calm, measured tone. Your Honor, these allegations are at best misrepresentative. My client, Mr. Brown, has never done anything but act in the best interest of his family. The alleged investments the plaintiffs made were voluntary contributions to a household. There was no expectation of repayment, because there was no debt to repay. This was a family, not a business transaction. He paused, allowing the words to linger for a moment before he went on. Indeed, much of the financial sacrifice over the years was borne by Mr. Brown personally. He gave up personal income and time to support his wives and children. Any implication that he exploited them is not founded on facts. Christine's head canted slightly, her eyes contracting. These were arguments she had heard before. The ones making her sacrifices appear charity, not partnership. The attorney continued. In addition, the property itself was never held jointly in legal fashion. It was always kept in Mr. Brown's name for practical reasons, as tends to happen in big families. This wasn't on the down low. Everyone knew about it. A gentle but biting whisper broke the hush. Christine, the words whispered loudly enough for reporters to overhear from where she stood. Understanding doesn't make it equitable. The judge's gaze glanced at her. Mrs. Brown, you will be silent unless spoken to by the court. Christine relaxed back, her expression calm once more, but her hands clasped the tabletop. Robin squirmed in her chair. She had not said a word yet, but even so, her body language spoke volumes. Arms crossed over her chest, hunched shoulders, the slightest head shake whenever the opposing attorney spoke. She was well aware the cameras picked up every reaction. Then Christine's attorney made his next salvo. Your Honor, we will show evidence that reveals a large sum of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, were withdrawn from family accounts during the months before Christine left. That money was deposited into accounts that only Mr. Brown and Mrs. Robin Brown controlled. The air in the room grew thick. Gaspings and mutterings spread through the crowd, and even the judge tensed forward a little. Kody's head jerked toward Christine's attorney. That is a gross misrepresentation of what occurred, he exclaimed, his voice violating the judge's earlier admonishment. The judge's gavel came down with a crash. Mr. Brown, you will not interrupt. Out of turn in my courtroom. Do you understand? Kody leaned back, his breathing coming harder now. Yes, Your Honor, he mumbled through gritted teeth. But the harm was done. The outburst only served to make him appear defensive. And in the public eye, defensive equaled guilty. Christine's attorney wasn't yet done. These transactions, Your Honor, coincidentally align with other significant family events, including disagreements over property division and the plaintiff's growing concerns about financial transparency. We believe this shows a deliberate effort to remove funds before they could be fairly divided. Robin's cheeks flushed deep red. She leaned toward Kody, whispering urgently. He nodded once, his eyes fixed on the table in front of him. The judge looked between both sides, her expression unreadable. This court will review all submitted financial records. Until then, I will not make assumptions, but I will remind all parties that withholding evidence or providing incomplete documentation will have serious consequences. The lawyers nodded, but the tension in the room didn't ease. By this point, the audience was leaning forward in their seats. This wasn't a courtroom fight. It was a public disintegration of a family that had once presented itself as a unit. Every raised brow, every hushed remark, every sidelong glance between Christine, Janelle, Kody, and Robin seemed like an unspoken page in a much larger book. And it was only the start. The air was heavy in the courtroom, so heavy that it seemed like everyone was holding their breath, anticipating the next punch. Christine's attorney had just thrown in the charge of hundreds of thousands of dollars, being transferred into accounts under Kody and Robin's control. The ripple it generated hadn't dissipated when he made his next action. "Your Honor," he said, his voice steady but carrying a certain weight. "At this time, I'd like to submit into evidence a set of documents that will clarify the extent of these transactions." He yanked open the large binder from his briefcase, and its metal rings clapped shut with a deafening click. It contained dozens of printed sheets, bank statements, emails, receipts. The clerk escorted them over to the judge. Paper glided across the wooden bench, repeating like a drumbeat, in the room's silence. "These are verified financial records," the lawyer explained. "They clearly show a pattern of withdrawals and transfers from joint family accounts directly into private accounts owned by Mr. Brown and Mrs. Robin Brown. And these weren't just minor amounts. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars at a time." The judge riffled through the first couple of pages, her brow furrowing as she read the figures. The courtroom leaned forward, each eye attempting to glimpse what was written there. From the defense table, Kody's face went a deep red. He straightened up, readjusting his tie with a sharp, quick movement. Robin's response was not the same. She came to a complete stop, staring at the binder as if it were a bomb about to detonate. Christine, on the other hand, kept her eyes straight ahead. She looked outwardly serene, but her hands were clenched so tightly into her lap that their knuckles had whitened. The attorney wasn't done yet. He approached the judge's bench, carrying another folder. "And along with these financial documents, we also have copies of emails between Mr. Brown and a financial planner. In the emails there is mention of liquidating shared assets prior to formal separation talks being finalized." A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. This was no longer about missing funds. This was about intent. Robin shook her head, leaning forward to Kody and speaking urgently in a whisper. Her lips were moving quickly, but the microphones couldn't pick up what she was saying. Kody nodded rigidly, his jaw tightening further. At last he couldn't restrain himself. "This is totally out of context," Kody exploded, his voice louder than he intended. The judge's gavel came down hard. "Mr. Brown, I told you so. One more distraction, and I will have you escorted from this courtroom." The tirade created a thick silence that followed. The witnesses shifted uneasily in the stand. Christine's attorney took advantage of the moment. "Your Honor, when you look at these emails and the bank transfers, the context is clear. The timeline perfectly fits. This is not conjecture. It's paperwork, and the question it provokes is one of serious import. Were these actions designed to keep my client and others from receiving their rightful share?" He then swiveled, his gaze boring into the defense table. "The numbers don't lie." The judge put the binder aside for now, staring straight at Kody's attorney. "Counsel, can you explain these transactions?" Kody's lawyer stood up, obviously anticipating this question. "Yes, Your Honor. These were not covert transfers. The accounts involved were always in my client's control, and the money was transferred for proper purposes, to pay for future expenses on family-related projects and commitments. Any suggestion of impropriety is baseless." But the excuse seemed tenuous in the air, like a thread pulled too tight. Christine's attorney moved forward once again, this time waving a one-page document. "If that's true, then why in this email does Mr. Brown specifically say, and I quote, 'We need to get this done before they start asking questions'?" The room fell into murmurs. The judge pounded her gavel again. Silence in the court. Kody's lawyer jumped in hastily. "That line is being taken out of context." Christine's lawyer interrupted. "Then let's hear the whole thing. This is the whole email." He started to read, the words cutting through the charged air. The inference was clear. The timing of the transfers, the secrecy, the implication of haste before they could quiz him. Christine breathed slowly, as if a burden she had carried for decades had just been put down, at least temporarily. Janelle's eyes flickered back and forth between the attorneys. Her lips locked hard, but her nod was nearly imperceptible, a silent sign that the truth was finally being revealed. Then came the moment no one expected. Christine's lawyer said, "Your Honor, at this time we'd like to call a surprise witness who can speak directly to the handling of these funds." Heads turned. Reporters craned their necks. The bailiff opened the side door, and in walked a middle-aged man in a dark suit, carrying another folder. "Here is the family's former accountant," explained the lawyer. "He was tasked with handling and monitoring the joint accounts for years." Kody's attorney jumped up in protest. "Your Honor, this witness was not on the original list." The judge held up a hand. "I will permit it. Continue." The accountant was sworn and seated in the witness stand. His voice was even and professional, but his words were a sledgehammer. "I had knowledge of the transfers involved. I counseled Mr. Brown then, that transferring these monies in the absence of an agreement among everyone involved could lead to legal problems. My counsel was not heeded." Kody's fingers cinched into fists on the table. The accountant went on. "Also, when I asked for complete documentation for the purpose of these withdrawals, I was informed by Mr. Brown that it was family businesses and no one else's concern." The air in the room had become thick with tension. Christine's attorney queried, "Based on your professional judgment, were these transfers in accord with open financial practices within a joint asset agreement?" The accountant hesitated. "Not at all. No, they were not." That one sentence fell like a stone into quiet water, the waves flowing through all parts of the room. Meri, who was sitting in the back, squirmed uncomfortably. She stared at her lap, refusing to meet Christine's eyes. The judge settled back in her chair, tapping a pen against her notes thoughtfully. "These witnesses will be taken under advisement by this court. The financial evidence will be weighed in its entirety before anything is ruled upon. But I will say this. What I heard today raises legitimate questions about transparency and fairness." The gavel fell. "This court is in recess until tomorrow morning." As individuals started to get up, the air was charged. Journalists hurried towards the doors, already getting their headlines ready in their minds. Kody Brown accused of hidden transfers. Unexpected witness testifies against Brown. Family scandal blows up in court. Christine slowly got up, collecting her papers. Janelle lightly brushed her arm. Not a hug, not a smile, but a nod. Kody and Robin hopped out of there in a hurry, dodging reporters' questions, but stiff backs and pinched faces told the tale louder than words ever could. And while the cameras popped outside, it was evident this wasn't anymore just a family feud. This was war. The air inside the courtroom was electric, charged with a tension so palpable it felt as if even the wooden benches and the heavy drapes could feel it. Every person present, from the stern-faced bailiff standing by the double doors to the smallest figure seated in the back row, seemed to hold their breath in collective anticipation, as the judge prepared to deliver the next crucial ruling, his gavel resting in his hand, like an unspoken promise of finality. And on the left side of the room, Kody Brown sat stiffly in his chair, his knuckles white from gripping the table edge too tightly, eyes darting toward Robin, who sat beside him, her expression a mask of composure, barely hiding the storm of emotions swirling beneath. Her lips pressed thin, as she avoided looking toward the opposing table where Christine sat, head held high, a quiet strength emanating from her even as her eyes betrayed the deep hurt and betrayal she had endured, the pain that had brought her to this moment. A moment that was more than just a legal dispute. It was the culmination of years of fractured trust, quiet tears behind closed doors, and the slow unraveling of a family that had once claimed to be unshakable. The judge's voice, calm yet carrying the weight of authority, cut through the stillness, reciting the evidence, testimonies, and the chain of events that had been laid bare over the past weeks, each word landing with the precision of a hammer against stone, making it impossible for anyone to pretend that this was just another day in court, because it wasn't. It was the day decisions would be made that could reshape the lives of everyone involved. And while the judge spoke of fair division of assets and equitable arrangements in the measured tone of the law, the undercurrent of emotion in the room told a very different story. One of love turned sour, loyalty betrayed, and the bitter taste of freedom that sometimes comes only when something you once held dear is finally let go. Christine's lawyer leaned forward, her voice steady, but infused with a quiet determination, as she reminded the court of the countless sacrifices her client had made over the years. The emotional labor, the child-rearing, the public scrutiny endured in silence, all while maintaining the image of unity that had shielded the cracks from public view for far too long. And Robin shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her own counsel countering with arguments of mutual consent, shared decisions, and the narrative that Kody's actions had always been in the interest of family cohesion, a phrase that now sounded hollow in the cavernous courtroom, echoing off the high walls like an empty promise. Kody's jaw tightened as the judge asked him direct questions. His answers clipped, carefully measured, but his eyes betraying flashes of irritation and defensiveness, the kind of unspoken resentment that had likely simmered beneath the surface for years. And all the while, Christine's calm demeanor never faltered, though inside her heart pounded with each passing moment, each legal term thrown across the room, feeling like another piece of her past being peeled away, another step toward the uncertain future that lay beyond those courtroom doors. The spectators leaned forward in their seats, unable to resist the magnetic pull of human drama unfolding before them, whispers flitting between them like moths drawn to a flame, but quickly silenced by the sharp gaze of the bailiff. Because this was not a place for gossip. It was a place where verdicts would be carved in stone, where gavel strikes could change destinies. And as the judge paused, his eyes scanning the faces before him, the silence that followed was almost unbearable, stretching on long enough for hearts to race, palms to sweat, and breaths to catch, until at last he spoke again, this time not just as a judge bound by legal codes, but as a man acknowledging the emotional gravity of the situation, reminding all parties that no matter the outcome, the shadow of this day would linger, not only in their lives, but in the eyes of those who had watched them from the outside. Their story no longer just theirs, but a cautionary tale, a fragment of public memory. When the gavel finally came down, the sound was sharp, final, and it rippled through the room like a thunderclap, sealing the decisions that had been painstakingly debated for hours, days, weeks. And as Christine gathered her papers with deliberate care, her movements slow and composed, she allowed herself the smallest of exhales, not of joy, but of relief. Because this chapter, heavy and bruising as it had been, was finally closing, while Kody remained seated for a moment longer, his eyes distant, perhaps already calculating his next move, perhaps struggling to accept that not everything could be controlled. And Robin's gaze stayed fixed on the floor, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as if holding on to herself was the only way to keep from unraveling in front of the world. The judge rose and exited through the side door, the murmur of the room swelling again, as people stood, chairs scraping against the polished floor, reporters adjusting their cameras to capture those final, fleeting moments of raw humanity before the principals slipped away into separate lives. And outside the courthouse, the afternoon light spilled across the steps, blinding in its brightness, a stark contrast to the shadows left behind inside, as Christine walked down them without looking back. Yen, her stride steady, while behind her, Kody and Robin followed at a slower pace. The distance between them, not just physical, but a chasm carved by choices, by love lost, by the irreversible truths laid bare in that solemn room where once, just hours earlier, they had all sat together, still bound, if only temporarily, by the cold, unyielding rules of the court. The courtroom was heavy with anticipation. The air was thick, as if the oxygen was weighed down by months of arguments, evidence, and feelings. The wooden walls, lined with panels, shone in the artificial lights, with the smooth surface reflecting snippets of tense faces and agitated hands. From the rear row to the very front, the benches were filled with a silent crowd, family newsmen taking notes, and strangers who had tracked the case like a suspenseful serial drama. The case had gone on for weeks, but today was the day everyone had been anticipating, the verdict. Everyone in the room was aware that when the gavel fell for the last time, lives would be altered forever. At the defense table, Kody Brown wore a dark, fitted suit, his hands laced tightly in front of him so that the knuckles were white. His attorney, a precise man with piercing eyes, leaned forward toward him, muttering something under his breath. Kody nodded rigidly, his eyes still scanning the jury box. To his side, the chair where Robin Brown had sat through the trial was now curiously vacant. Her silence was another shadow within the room. Opposite, the prosecution team awaited intense expectation. The woman who led them, averse to deviation from detail, clicked her pen once against her papers, then set it down with deliberation. She was the sort who lived on precision. Each question she had posed throughout the trial had sliced like a scalpel, and now, even she appeared to be holding her breath. Judge Harrison Whitmore, a man whose snowy hair was at odds with his rigid, youthful stance, strode in through the side door. His black robes rustled softly against the floor as he mounted the bench. He sat down, looked around the courtroom, and banged his gavel once, not firmly but hard enough to jolt each errant thought back into the here and now. "Court is in session," he stated, his own voice having an even timbre that gave no indication of personal bias. "We are here to hear the reading of the verdict in the case of the state versus Kody Brown. Jury, have you reached a unanimous verdict?" The jury foreperson, a middle-aged woman with steel-gray hair and an unflappable, determined expression, stood up. She held a folded piece of paper in her hand, as if it held the burden of 1,000 weights. "Yes, Your Honor, we have." Judge Whitmore nodded slowly. "Hand the verdict form to the bailiff." The bailiff, who was a tall man with a controlled gait, took the paper and handed it to the judge. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft friction of clothing as people adjusted their positions. The judge opened the paper and read it in silence first, his face unchanging, though a minute furrowing at the outer corners of his eyes suggested that the words were weighty. He glanced upwards. "Will the defendant rise?" Kody's chair creaked as he rose. His actions were methodical, near robotic. His breathing was calm, but his gaze concealed flashes of dread, remorse and rebelliousness at the same time. His attorney stood by him, shoulders squared, holding his ground. The judge read from the sheet. "In the case of the state versus Kody Brown, on the charge of fraud, we the jury find the defendant guilty." A wave of noise rolled across the room, a sudden gasp there, a soft "oh my God" here. But it was brought to an abrupt halt by the judge's disapproving glare. Kody's jaw clenched, his face paling. For the first time, his eyes strayed from the jury and onto the wooden floor at his feet, as if it would simply yawn and engulf him. The judge went on. "On the count of obstruction of justice, we the jury find the defendant guilty." This time, the response was louder, more difficult to hold back. A few journalists wrote furiously, the snapping of their pens barely audible in the charged atmosphere. Kody's attorney put a calming hand on his client's arm, but the move seemed nearly useless. The man who had entered the courtroom once with a sense of composure, now seemed like someone waiting in the eye of a hurricane. Finally, the judge read the final charge. "On the charge of conspiracy, we the jury find the defendant guilty." The words hit like the last blow of a hammer. This wasn't half justice. This was full condemnation. Judge Whitmore laid the verdict paper down and folded it. "The court thanks the jury for their service. Sentencing will occur 1 week from today." He stopped and then spoke to the court. "In light of the convictions, the defendant is remanded in custody from today." 2 officers in uniform drew up behind Kody. Metal clicked in the silent room as handcuffs were snapped onto his wrists. Kody winced slightly, but offered no resistance. He looked fleetingly in the direction of the public gallery, where Christine Brown was seated in the second row. Her expression was impassive, neither victorious nor sorrowful, but merely still, as if she had been waiting for this very moment for a long time. Just beside her, Janelle Brown inched forward, her lips pursed in a tight line, eyes tracking every step. The drama between the Browns had been ongoing for years. But this was not about stale family drama. This was about seeing the inevitable unfold. From the rear, Robin Brown slipped in quietly, unnoticed at first. Her eyes were puffy from tears, her movements hesitant. She saw the handcuffs on Kody and a sob escaped her throat. She took a step forward as if to move closer, but one of the officers raised a hand, stopping her. "Kody," she whispered faintly, her voice shaking. He inclined his head slightly, catching her gaze for a fleeting instant. There was no smile, no nod, only a heavy unspoken acknowledgement. Judge Whitmore brought down his gavel once more. "Court is adjourned." The sound echoed through the room, final and inescapable. People started to stir, some hesitantly, some in a hurry, like water released after a dam is breached. As Kody was escorted towards the side door, the media pushed forward, cameras flashing, shouts were yelled, their wild echoes pounding against the walls. "Mr. Brown, do you have anything to say? Do you still maintain your innocence? What do you want to tell your family?" He didn't reply. His attorney, who followed in his wake, grumbled and under the breath, no comment before the pair vanished into the machinery of the justice system. Within the gallery, Christine and Janelle shared a fleeting glance, not one of triumph, but of mutual comprehension. They knew both that the trial had been a public affair, but the result was very personal. Lives had been entwined, oaths sworn and forfeited, and now the fault rested squarely on Kody's shoulders. Robin sat in her seat long after the crowd had dispersed, gazing at the vacant space where Kody had sat just seconds before. She held onto her handbag tightly, as if it was the sole connection to reality she had left. Her weeping had subsided somewhat, but her breathing was still irregular. She eventually got up and departed silently, keeping away from the reporters who were standing by the exit. Outside, the stairs of the courthouse were a whirlwind of activity, news trucks, microphones, cameras and an ocean of people. There were those who came to hear the story, some to witness the drama, and others because history had just been created in that courtroom. The ruling would be headlined for weeks, analyzed by experts and argued by strangers on the internet. But to those at its center, the din outside was noise. The choices had been finalized. The gavel had dropped, and in the reverberation, the world Kody Brown had known disappeared forever.